Following on from last week's video, the views were alright, so I thought I'd just do them, and it's my chance to vent or talk about interesting things that have come up over the last week. And I think, in particular, one of the things that's kind of gone round a full circle has been Ange Postecoglu. So today's video, we're going to be talking about Ange. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. The comments for the Ten Hag video were pretty good. A lot of agreed, a lot didn't agree, which is absolutely fine. I will always try my hardest. Well, I will reply to all the comments as long as you're not a dick. There was a dickhead in there last week. I don't do anything for clicks because I'm definitely not getting the views that I would like. Just trying to talk and have a little bit of a chat. So today we're going to talk about Ange. Now, little heads up, I'm a big Ange fan. Definitely from the days of Celtic. Once I covered a football manager video last year or a couple of years ago on Ange at Celtic, I was kind of hooked. Also to consider, my dad supports Spurs, and Spurs have always been my second team, one of my favourite players of all time, David Ginola. So combining those little three makes Tottenham a very close second towards Manchester United at the moment for number one, who I just like to follow. And with the way Tottenham have been playing since the days of Mourinho, Conte, Nuno, I think Ange has had a little bit of a bad time. So we're going to first of all talk about the recent form. We're going to talk about the change that he's made. We're going to talk about the team itself and how good it is. And then just because I don't want to make it completely one-sided, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that slightly just annoy me a little bit about Ange and things that he will never change because he knows more than me, but just a couple of things that I think frustrates a lot of Spurs fans without getting too carried away. My dad in particular, I'll speak about a comment that he made to me on Sunday when the score was 2-2. So far this season, I think Spurs have been relatively unlucky. So right now they're lying ninth, which isn't great. 3 wins, 1 draw, 3 defeats. 14 goals scored and only 8 conceded, which, to be fair, for a Spurs side, which is supposed to be all gun blazing, just conceding a goal a game ain't too bad. Considering Manchester City have conceded 8. Chelsea have conceded 8, Villa 9, Brighton 10, Man United 8, but they've only scored 5. So, scoring 14, on the face of it, with chances as well, if we look at the results, I think they've been, I don't want to say unlucky, because the lack of quality has maybe cost them getting more points. But I don't think the performances have been bad. Played really well against Leicester, should have won that. Played really well against Everton, got what they deserved. Absolutely battered Newcastle and should have been at least 2 or 3 up, and a Newcastle broke away, which will happen, especially when you're going against quality of Newcastle, but they were trying to win the game and got outdone. Arsenal, I thought, they were not unlucky because they didn't create enough chances, but on another day, bearing in mind that Arsenal didn't really create anything and scored from a set piece, that could have quite easily swung the other way. And if we're talking about that result, beating Arsenal, you imagine what the mood would have been like. I know they didn't, but there's absolutely really fine lines. They played okay against Brentford, played obviously really well against Manchester United, and then, as Ange said, their worst 45 minutes in the second half against Brighton. However, the first 45 was absolutely breathtaking. I always watch Spurs, obviously, because you know that I like them, like Ange, like the way they play, and it was absolutely fantastic to watch. So, on the face of it so far this season, maybe they're just underperforming slightly. I think 9th is a little bit, we talk about Man United, they deserve to be 14th because they're playing absolutely dog shit. And I think Spurs have been slightly unlucky, slightly wasteful. Combine them two together, you're maybe going to get some results that you don't like. So let's talk about Ange in particular. The style of play has completely transformed. We're all aware of that. We're aware of those inverted fullbacks coming in, and it's been fantastic to watch. Now, the one thing about him is the plan A. There's only a plan A. However, I do believe that a lot of teams in and around the top flight just have a plan A, and what they have is different options in the squad. And I think Tottenham's plan B necessarily doesn't need to be a complete change in tactic, but the variation of players that they've got in their squad. So what I mean by that is that he can soon change how the game is played depending on personnel. So this is pretty much right here, the first team squad of all the options. Now the back line we're going to kind of ignore. However, yes, they've only got really one style of play, but depending on the personnel really dictates how they would play. Look, perfect example, left-hand side. Werner's been playing because of Son's injury. The amount of play that they gave, the amount of ball that Werner's had in the last 2 games against Manchester United and Brighton would have been completely different to if Son would have been playing because of the sheer pace of Werner. On the opposite side, Kulusevski has played out on the right up until the last few weeks and now come central. If he was out on this right-hand side here, how he plays to a Brennan Johnson is completely different. If a Pape Sarr comes in instead of a Kulusevski, completely different. I would argue as well, Basuma and Bentancur. Bentancur seems to be better out of possession than Basuma. I would argue that probably Basuma is better in possession. So there's lots of different changes within the system that would see Spurs playing differently depending on personnel. Richarlison and maybe Solanke is a little bit like for like. However, I don't think they need a plan B. Most teams have said just try and make plan A better and tweak. Now, the only thing that really bugs me about Ange is sometimes the in-game management and just the reliance of doing it for 90 minutes, full game, without just taking the foot off the gas a little bit. And I know what he's trying to instill. He's trying to instill this super confidence of we go out and do it. But I would just, at times, especially at the start of that second half, when Brighton got that first goal with that doggy mistake at the far post, I think it was 47 minutes, they got back into it. It would just be good if they could just calm down just for a little bit. What I don't see from Ange, it's really weird that you don't see a lot of communication from him from the side. I could be wrong, but a lot of time he's just watching the game. And I think it's like, right, I've set my team up how I want them to play, and that's it. And off they go. And I feel at times it would just help if there was a little bit of restraint, just 5 minutes, slow the play down, get our foothold in the game with maybe a couple of, keeping the possession at the back and with the goalie, and then building from there. And it just feels like sometimes the games get a little bit too crazy and the game can be over relatively quickly. So that would be my one little tweak. My one little moan about Ange as well is just sometimes how he handles press conferences. But that's him. Sometimes he's fantastic, sometimes he's not. That's not really perfected performance. Maybe a little bit more in terms of him on the sideline instead of just allowing this full throttle for 90 minutes. Maybe just not tweaking things, but just trying to calm things down, getting the team back on the ball like they did in the first half because they absolutely bossed it. I think Brighton only really looked good on the counter-attack in the first half. The second half, to be fair to Brighton, played extremely well, but a little bit more better in terms of game management would help. Now, the thing that bugs me the most, in particular about Spurs fans, is what they expect. And I know they're, ninth at the moment of whatever we said, but they're in and around sort of like that top six. They will be there at the end of the season. I've got no question about that, in particular because the European stage is probably not going to take effect till the latter half. They'll be able to rotate depending on how well the draw is. They haven't won a trophy in so long. We know that. Highly likely, I think they could be even classed as favourites for the Europa League this year, ahead of Manchester United, especially if Man United keep with Ten Hag. And my dad said to me at 2-2 on Sunday, and it's probably a pessimistic Spurs fan, we're never going to win a trophy with him in charge. And it's like, okay, that's fair enough. I said to him, well, one, you've got a good chance of winning Europa, and I think Spurs fans will probably be disappointed if they don't, get to the final of that. However, what else do you expect? Maybe a cheeky Carabao, but let's be honest. Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool final last year, Man City take it extremely, extremely seriously. So with that, you're not guaranteed to win it. Yes, you might get to a final, and then it's not even a 50-50. You come against Man City, you come against Liverpool, you come against Arsenal. Chances are you're not going to be favourites for that. So there's no guaranteed success. And then the next thing is talking about the amount of money spent. And I think the spending generally over the last couple of seasons has been brilliant from Spurs, really good. They've padded out the squad, as we could see. There's kind of nearly 2 for every position. Maybe potentially in defence, they may be a little bit weak. Archie Gray hasn't really featured that much and played even more at centre-back, even though at Leeds he was probably a number 6, trying to do a little bit of a job at right-back. But if we look at the squad now, how many of those players would get into a starting 11 at Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool? How many? The answer is very few, if any. I would love to hear your thoughts. How many of these, not so much would be good enough, because I imagine, Maddison could do a job for Liverpool in midfield, but how many of these, if Slot, Guardiola and Arteta were picking a player from these, how many would get into their starting 11? For me, I only see potentially one. If we go from back to front, like Vicario, no. Let's just take out some other ones, Let's take out Reguilon, Spence, Davies. We'll keep Dragusin in and Gray. We'll have a look. We'll take Bergville out for now. And Mikey Moore, who is going to be a decent prospect. So these are kind of your first and your second choice options. Let's take Foster out as well. So with that, good options, but are any of these better than what they've got? Is Vicario better than the goalkeepers at those three clubs? Absolutely not. There's been question marks over him. Archie Gray potentially will be, but right now, no. Porro, probably one of those ones that you could maybe say would maybe be a good option at Man City, Arsenal or Liverpool, but if you're playing your strongest 11, would he get in? No. Romero is a strange one for me. I do not rate him very much at all. I think he's rash. I think he's quite selfish in how he plays at times in terms of conceding fouls and doesn't really complement Mickey van der Ven well. Dragusin would be an option at some point, but I think with Romero being quite high up in influential in the sort of like was he backup captain maybe? Was he maybe second choice captain, vice captain maybe? So that would be an issue, but not good enough. Dragusin we haven't seen enough of, but once again, he's a backup, won't get anywhere near. The only other one is maybe Mickey van der Ven. He maybe would be good enough. Is he better than a Saliba? Gabriel? No. Is he better than a Kanate? Maybe. Is he better than a Van Dijk? He'd play well up alongside a Van Dijk. And then Man City with their whole host of centre-halves. He'd do a good job at Man City, wouldn't he, in one of those sort of like inverted fullback roles. But, he's an iffy. Udogie, no. Would be a good squad rotation option, but has been quite poor, especially in defensive areas this season and last season. Great going into these areas, but a big problem, as we saw at the weekend, with his clumsy clearance. Wouldn't expect a Robertson to do that. You wouldn't expect a Nathan Ake to do that at Manchester City. So something to think about. Or a Calafiori Arsenal have now signed Calafiori to play in at that left back row. Middle of midfield, maybe Liverpool are a little bit light, so they could probably do with one of these as an option. Maddison, none of the real big boys wanted him, and the rest of them just wouldn't get in. They're all good. They're all good, but they're all good for a sixth, maybe a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth place team, not for a first, second and third. Same with the wingers. Like, as much as we love Son, we know that he's probably on the downward trajectory in terms of his blistering pace to get past players. Probably will need to come a poacher at some point. But the way Ange likes to play with that lone striker, being a really aggressive, he's going to struggle with that. Tino Werner, we all know, I do really like him, and he was fantastic at Brighton, getting him behind. Couple of, a pass at the start of the game when he squared it to Brennan Johnson. He maybe should have taken it on himself and had a couple of big chances in the first half as well. He's adequate as a backup for Sonny. Right-hand side, Brennan Johnson's in a rich vein of form. He came from Nottingham Forest. None of the other big clubs were interested in him. Odebear as well, out injured at the moment. Looks like a talent. None of the big boys fancied him. Richarlison, not good enough. Dominic Solanke, Arsenal were looking at a striker. Manchester City are nowhere near need a Solanke when they've got Haaland. And Liverpool had him and got rid of him. Obviously, he's better now than what he was then. But just looking at that, how many players would get into a starting 11 at those top three clubs? Even if you look at Chelsea, there's a lot of maybe players that would be good enough of squad fillers. But if you look at maybe the Chelsea real starting 11, how many of these would get into that? Maybe a couple. Even Manchester United under a better organised team, how many would get in? Potentially Van der Ven. They do need maybe a Porro, a Maddison. Necessarily the wide players wouldn't. So what more does Spurs fans expect? They've done really well, but the big players, the superstars, are choosing to play for Man City, Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea still, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Inter Milan even. And I wouldn't even say Inter Milan's in that bracket. So with that, they're kind of doing as best they can. I think they dropped off remarkably towards the end of last season, which was a shame because that would have been fourth. However, this season has given them a chance to build, potentially win a European trophy. I think getting into the Champions League, getting to a quarter-final is maybe good for money, but winning a European trophy is absolutely doable. There's no Champions League clubs coming down. Now, if we look at the league itself, Lazio Lyon, FSB, which is a Romanian team, Anderlecht, Ajax, Gala, Frankfurt, Michelin, Sparta Prague, Bilbao, Hoffenheim, Fenerbahce, Bodo Glimt, Olympiacos, Elfsborg Rangers, AZ Alkmaar, Malmo, Braga, United, Plzeň, Twente, Porto, Sociedad, Roma, Ludogorets, Union Saint-Gilles, the Belgian team, RFS, Ludogorets, we said, Nice, Ferencváros, Tel Aviv, PAOK, Karabag, Dynamo Kiev and Besiktas. Now, there is some tricky games in there, but you'd expect over two legs to probably do a Lazio a Lyon, an Ajax, a Manchester United, a Roma, Porto, Sociedad. These are teams that they really should be looking at winning. So if they can win something in here, I think they've done remarkably well. Yes, they probably need to finish top 5, top 6 in the Premier League, which is definitely doable. I think the longer Manchester United leave it, the worse they're going to get. I'm not totally sold on Newcastle yet. They're still finding it pretty tricky. I think even Newcastle have found it quite difficult in terms of points on the board and lucky to maybe get a win. Getting anything out of the Bournemouth game. They've stuttered against Everton. They stuttered against Tottenham. So with that, I think a top 6 finish, Europa League, and then just maybe a little bit more game management. Spurs won't be anywhere unrealistic where they're going to be. I would love to hear your thoughts. So I'm a big Ange fan. I just love how it plays. Yes, I'm a neutral, but now going to watch York City, where in the 5th tier of football, they're managing to invert one of their fullbacks and dominate possession. I think Spurs don't look to dominate possession. They look to move the ball exceptionally quickly, which leaves them maybe open to a little bit more counter-attacking, but it's fantastic to watch. And when Spurs were with Nuno, Mourinho and Conte, I think they would have taken this, but we're just, Spurs fans, you're just getting a little bit too picky. What do you expect with the quality of players that you've signed? Not good enough to take you into that next level. You're in that 4th, 5th, 6th alongside a Chelsea, an Aston Villa, Newcastle, Manchester United. You're in that pool at the moment. So anything in and around that. Now, if you finish lower than that, you finish lower out of that, what would we call it? So if you finished out of, there's your top 3. Then you got 4, 5, Brighton, Newcastle 6, Tottenham 7, Manchester United 8th. Maybe if you end up finishing a 9th, where you are now, but I'd expect you to finish maybe higher than Brighton, higher than Fulham. Where else, in and around it, unless there's maybe 30 points off 4th place and you're absolutely a million miles off, which you won't be, then I can't understand the real frustration. I think the frustration is throwing that lead at the weekend as well. That hasn't helped. Even if just killing the game a little bit, maybe bringing Pape Sarr on a little bit quicker, identifying that the game is maybe running away a little bit and not parking the bus because he'd never do that, but just a couple of changes. Remember I said about that plan A? Just personnel changes a plan, I think, from a plan A to a plan A/B. Does that make sense? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. Give us your thoughts on Ange, on Spurs, on the players, on the squad, and what you would like me to cover on next week's. I need a little thing for this, a name. I don't need a name, but I need another Trek Talks. That sounds shit, doesn't it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you later.